Welcome, 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 family. This is your brother, asarimhotep, with the Madhu Indela Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture. And we are here again. Today is Thursday, July 16th. It's 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And we are still in these COVID-19 streets. But I hope that everyone is being safe and wearing your mask, and you have your hand sanitizers, and that you are doing your physical and social distancing and staying safe, out here in these COVID streets. Today is a special day because we have two dynamic guests with us today, an actual mother and daughter team, Mrs. Rebecca and Nia Christian, who are the founders and creators of the Millennial Tech Institute, which is an online institute that teaches children ages 7 through 13 the coding and tech skills that they will need for the emerging job market, and in AI and things of that nature, and robotics. And so this is going to be a very STEM oriented conversation. That's science, technology, engineering, and math. But I guess we'll be more with the technology and the programming and probably some math. So computer science deals with a lot of math. I don't know if they will give you any formulas to figure out, but only time will tell. So, but before I bring our guest on, I want to give a shout out to everyone who is listening live, and of course, all of you who are catching the archives. I know some of y'all may be getting off of work or cooking and the like, and you will come and check us out later. And so, with that said, this coming Saturday, in terms of announcements, we have the Hoppy film. We've been advertising. It's going to be July the 18th, which is a Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. This is the documentary film that deals with the relationship between economics and the building of civilizations. And, Hopi is the name of the Nile River, according to the ancient Egyptians themselves. And matter of fact, the Ethiopians to this date still call it Abe, the Nile River. And so, luckily I have been blessed to be a part of that film. I have a small role in the film, but I'm in the film nonetheless. And there's an array of dynamic, scholars who have been able to be a part of this film. And it is very refreshing, very well done. Our good brother Taki Grant put this thing together along with Sister Felicia. and Brother Seed with Tahuti Films, and they put an excellent documentary film together. So I encourage everyone to go to hoppyfilm.com. You can see the link scrolling at the bottom of the page, hoppyfilm.com, and get your tickets. And as I mentioned before, with this is you have to treat this like if you were going to the movies. That being said, when you purchase your ticket, it's not a ticket where you just kind of like what you do on Netflix and you can watch the movie any time. They're streaming it starting at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So you're going to have to be in front of your computer or smart TV or your phone, however you choose to watch the film. And so just so want to keep that in mind. So go to hoppyfilm.com. July 18th is when they're going to premiere the film, and they're going to do more of these. So if you miss it, but catch it this Saturday. Be one of the cool people who sees it on opening weekend, and start conversations around what you see, in the film itself. So peace and love to everyone who has made themselves known, in the chat room. So peace to Chauncey, peace to Rashu, peace to Sister Mika, and peace to Sabi Sabs, peace to Sister Rocky, another genius tech person who I know personally, Samuel Stanford, and Brother Kofi Pasai with Kofi Pasai TV. Thank you for joining us, in the chat room. And so if you have any questions, of course, for our guest, type it into the chat, and I will be sure to ask them. So I think that is it for my announcements for now. So with that said, I want y'all to welcome Sister Rebecca and her daughter Nia to the program. How are y'all doing? Let me unmute your mics.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you so much, Asar, for having us on the show. We really appreciate it. Can't thank you enough.
We appreciate you for coming on and sharing your story and your vision, to the community. And so, a lot of people may know, besides being an avid historian and linguist, and I like to talk about political and stuff matters. I also like to talk about tech and science and things of that nature. And most people should know by now that I'm a software developer. So this, what we're engaging in today is very, very, very close to home, and I'm excited to see what it is that y'all are doing. And so before we get into what is currently going on with the two of you, I guess I will start off with Sister Rebecca. If you can give us a little background of yourself, where you're from, your educational interest, and how did you come to get into what it is that you're doing now regarding the Institute, and then we'll get on the Institute itself in all its details, and then we'll get to come to you, Sister Nia.
Absolutely. Well, I grew up in Long Island, New York, and came from a very large family. Graduated from high school, went on to college. I went to Hofstra University in Long Island, New York. There, I still wasn't quite sure what I was interested in, and I majored in liberal arts. But I noticed one thing. I had a lot of friends who were in the Washington, D.C. area, and I visited, and I absolutely loved it. So having that interest and having friends here in the Washington, D.C. metro area, I eventually, after leaving college and after graduating, relocated to Washington, D.C. Once in Washington, D.C., I had a couple of different jobs. Again, not really sure what I was interested in. But then I had a job, beginning to substitute teach. And it was through substitute teaching that I eventually decided that I kind of like education. Had the opportunity to work with kids all the way from first grade all the way up to, I'd say, college. But during these experience that I've had, I went back to Trinity University here in Washington, D.C. I earned a master's degree, actually three, one in English, one in social science, and one in reading, because I found along the way that while I was working and teaching, is that a lot of our kids came to us with literacy problems. So it was during that time period that I really learned. My girls were, I'll say, about like in the 6th grade or so, and I was looking around. I was like, gosh, I don't know. As a parent, where am I going to send them to middle school? And every parent wants the best possible education for their child. So I looked around, I visited, and then happened upon finding out that at the time, Howard University had instituted its first middle school. It was the brainchild of Dr. Hassan Minor. And I think that was a really game changer for my experience as an educator. And I think for the students who had the opportunity to go through the doors there. Matter of fact, I actually worked at Howard. It was I won't say by accident, because my oldest daughter got in the first year through a lottery. And, they kind of found out that a lot of the kids who were there had difficulty with reading. And at the time I was working as a reading specialist. And so when I came in, we had kids who were, all across the city, all the wards of Washington, D.C., had all the state-of-the-art equipment, computers, but literacy was a problem for, a number of kids. So what we were able to do there is, people like Delmar Williams, who set up the tech. We had, I think, probably state-of-the-art at the time. But while I was there, I had exposure to working with, a lot of the professors on Howard University's campus. And the second year that I was there, my daughter, Nia, came in. And they happened to ask me, would you like to come over? And so I switched from going from a local school system to working in the charter school. And I stayed there for 10 years. So I would say that experience really showed me that all the possibilities, when kids are exposed to things like, computer science, mathematics, and also from expertise. I was able to do a lot of cross-curricular curriculum for the kids. We had STEM literacy, which was something that I helped to develop. And working with, it wasn't just science class, but it was also how to apply the sciences, whether it be engineering, to literacy, and to helping these kids show that they could be more and do more. And I think that any child, at least at the time while I was there, had that kind of exposure. They're now coming out of schools as scientists. And these were kids that maybe, under other circumstances may not have had those options. So I would say my exposure to seeing the possibilities that someone in our community said, you know what, we need more African Americans in STEM, and actually not just talking about it, but actually doing something. And I think that was one of the things that catalyst that really said, wow, and I wanted, my girls to be in STEM. One is in, a pharmacy. Another one is in, Nia, she's in computer science. But again, I think those kind of exposure and experience is what is the game changer for, I think, our kids. And I didn't want to limit them. I didn't want them to think that because you were a girl, you can only go into education, and typically I found that a lot of the kids that I had met in other experiences, although they may have wanted to go into STEM, they would get to college and find out that they didn't have the fundamentals. And college is really kind of like, I won't say too late, but you don't want to start there, figure out, oh, well, you don't know how to do this type of mathematics. You weren't good in statistics. So if our kids have early exposure early on, they can be game changers. And I just look at all of the kids. It's not just getting that degree, not just getting that piece of paper, but what can you do to impact other lives in a positive way? Because I believe that the solutions to the problems that we face are in our community. The solutions are there. And a lot of them are just the young people that need the exposure and the access. So I say not just having reading literacy, math literacy, science, but you need to add in coding literacy. And, so I would say that was my exposure. And when you see kids, we had kids win top competitions at that school for years. And I think, again, great minds and being able to see that and, have these kids now where they're working in political activism and knowing that, the cultural aspect, the STEM aspect culminating can make a really powerful formula for our community. So I would say that was my exposure. I had always wanted to come to Washington, D.C. and live here. But finally, actually being able to be a part of seeing the change that you can have in a community and really the impact that STEM can make. I've been a part of that. And I just say that, I love reading. I love the English part, but to me, the future is STEM and especially coding, and I'll let Nia talk more about that. But I will just say that to me, the coding is like, the algorithm is a new God. That's all I can say. Algorithms, are controlling so much of what we do, and we are not as aware of it as we should be. Many of us, some of us are, but not enough of us are. So I say, parents, while you're thinking about the hobbies, you got the football, you got the cheerleading, whatever, add in coding. It's not either or, it's this and. So that's kind of how I see the future being. But I think that's kind of like how I got into it. And I'll let Nia take over because I could talk.
No, it's all good. So I assume, Nia, that you're from DC or the Maryland area, given the relationship to your mother. So, now she mentions that, she's in the educational part, and especially with the reading and the English and things of that nature. But what gravitated you towards, coding and computer science versus pharmacy, with your other sister, as mentioned before? What were those motivations?
Well, I do want to say hi to the people in the chat. I can't type, but I want to say hi to them. So I think I just always had an interest in just seeing how things worked and, just putting things together, whether it was a kit with wires and trying to start a light, which were some projects that I had in elementary school, or, even building on that and using motors to try and build a fan. And then in addition to attending schools such as Howard University Middle School, and even my high school, and even just additional programs throughout the summer, such as Phillips Academy, MS Squared, I really was introduced to a lot of teachers. I was lucky enough to be introduced to teachers who were able to see that interest in me or see that potential that I had, and who could continue to encourage me to pursue a career or pursue just a degree or an education in math and science, because I think a lot of times it can be really intimidating, but anytime you do have a teacher who shows that support or shows that concern, really just an interest in, seeing their students grow, that can have such an impact. Because as my mother mentioned, when you move to college, sometimes professors can be less involved and they're not always going to be concerned about your best interest. And if that's an area, or if that's a point in your life where you haven't really been sure about what you want to study, it's easy to really get lost. So I would say just having that natural interest in wanting to understand how things work, and having teachers and parents who were willing to support that and willing to give me enough resources and give me the tools that I needed in order to gain more information in this industry. That I guess I could say that was where the interest sort of started.
Indeed, indeed. Now, we're here in part because of this Millennial Tech Academy. So we go from, teaching and being inspired to introduce young people to STEM on a physical campus somewhere, and then of course with Sister Nia, she is involved in this herself. But what made y'all come together and say, you know what, we need to expand on this and create our own institute, and to, as we say, educate the babies, even though they're not literally babies, but they're young. But so how did that process evolve?
Well, I think that we both had an interest. especially, sort of expressing some of the concerns, whether it was in the career field, and not seeing people that looked like you, not really having that role model there, someone that could serve as a mentor or that could guide you into a particular path, whether it was self-entrepreneurship in the STEM field or whether it was trying to gain employment in the STEM field. And then also from, my experience in college, not having as many students in the classroom that look like you, it is discouraging, and it sort of makes you question whether you belong in that space. And seeing as how everything currently in the world is moving towards technology at such a rapid pace now, it was either students will be prepared for careers in this new world, or they would just be left behind. And it's something that I'm sure my mom could speak more to, is not something that we felt was really being discussed in the actual classroom.
Right. And I think that the pandemic has also amplified the fact that many of us don't have either the connectivity. There's a big disparity in terms of not just skills, but then also access. So World Economic Forum says 133 million jobs or opportunities based on these developments in these new technologies, robotics, AI, etc. But there's also a skills gap. And we know that if kids can get early exposure, and especially before the age of 12, and I'll let Nia talk a little bit about that, about what happens at the age of 12, what the research is saying.
Right. And research has really shown that when students are peaking or headed towards that age of 12 or 13, that they really start to lose interest in STEM. And so at that point where you're trying to introduce students to a new career or where the world is headed, they're no longer interested. And so it's really, almost as if your effort isn't going anywhere. And so by introducing it to them at an earlier age, you're able to, you have a little bit longer to discuss and introduce some of these fundamentals to them. And then they also have more time to build and gain experience in
and it's getting them while they're young. And so to me, it's almost like gaining a fluency in the fundamentals that you need to be successful, whether you decide you want to be an entrepreneur or if you decide you want to work for somebody. But having that skill set early on, because the capacity that you need to build for the different types of software positions, you do need the training. You do need that. Now, of course, there's different paths to get there. Some people may decide to do certificates as opposed to going directly into computer science through college. So I think that's also another shift that's happening, brought about by this new technologies. So not everybody's going to college, but I think when kids are able to learn early, maybe they get a certification in high school. You have some kids now in private schools who are already getting certifications in some of these different technologies. So that means if in our community, if our kids are not involved, if they're not getting exposure at early ages, not just wait until they're 15, I want to stick them in a class. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but you want them to see the possibilities early on, because otherwise, to me, it just puts us in a different position where we're not in a position to kind of know, to have been on the forefront of a field that's really exploding at this point. And the funny thing about it is the World Economic Forum, their report on the future of jobs, it also said that over 75 million jobs would be lost. And I said at the time when I read this report a couple of years ago, I said, how is that going to happen? And here we are in the pandemic. How many jobs is there gone already? And some of them are not going to come back.
Yeah.
So to me, it gives opportunity. Out of the chaos, you also have opportunity. So are people going to look at this challenge that for the kids? Can you expose them now to what's coming? Schools, a lot of schools now are not going to be in person. Some will, but a lot won't. So you may have kids in first grade who have to learn how to navigate these systems. But to me, that's the best time, because they can do it. They're born in this generation where it's sometimes it's used more. The phone and things are used more as a toy, but it is a computer. So getting them to think about it a little bit differently, I think, is part of the challenge too. But yeah, so it's here. I don't think nobody can stop it. It's just a matter of how do we want to be in it? Do we want to be at the forefront creating the ecosystems for computer science and what it looks like online, or are we going to wait somebody to give that to us?
Exactly. And I think another piece of it is all about looking at the signs and looking at the statistics. And as you know, my mother just mentioned, there's an increase in the number of jobs that are requiring skills, whether it's in science, technology, engineering, or math. And because of this increase, it's causing a decrease in certain jobs that maybe were typically didn't require as much. But something that also isn't changing, if we're looking at statistics, is the wage gap. Whether it's the wage gap between Black men and their counterparts with white males, which is even lower if we consider Black women. And so we believe that when students have these fundamental skills, they're really able to not only prepare themselves for the future economy, but they're able to develop their own opportunities.
Yes, I think that's key. And I think, you know, the way that we may even see jobs will be very different in the future. You know, some of it is things beyond our control, but some of it is, you know, well, maybe we don't have to have as many people here, you know, or maybe. So I think the more that we're able to acquire these skills and master them is going to be key in terms of how we're able to move forward in this new frontier.
I think a good side, I don't know if it's necessarily a side effect, but people don't realize, you know, well, if you're going full-blown computer science, you know, it requires some knowledge of math, at minimum finite math, discrete math as we call it. But what software development does and mathematics does is that it trains the mind to be able to look for patterns and to critically examine things and find solutions to problems, because it's very solution oriented. And so that's the whole point of you coming together to create some software or whatnot, is to solve a particular, you know, problem. And, you know, everything may not have a ready-made template, and you have to creatively, so there's a level of creativity that's involved in the process of coding and dreaming up a particular solution. And this can be utilized beyond simply the software development and engineering process that I think, you know, people kind of miss. But how do you, I don't know, matter of fact, let's go there first. So the Millennial Tech Academy, what kind of courses are you offering now, and what kind of courses do you plan to offer in the future?
So currently we offer intro to coding courses, which are really just for students who may not necessarily have a background, or even if you do have a background, sometimes students may not feel as confident about their skills, but just a starting place for them to really gain exposure to coding. We also have RPA, Robotic Process Automation courses, which are a little bit more, I think, I really have interest in all of the courses, but especially RPA, because I've seen that being utilized actually in industry. So we thought, you know, if we're able to introduce these tools to students and show them how to use these tools that are actually being used by companies that are bidding on projects for banks or for government. My apologies. RPA is robotic process automation, and pretty much what it allows a student or any user to do is to piece together a solution, any solution to solve a problem from a completely automated perspective. So it would almost be, it involves the coding aspect, but it's for something that's a simple task that can be repeated on, whether it's a day-to-day basis. So whether that may be, let's say, a prime example,
self-checkout.
If you need a website, or if you need a robot to retrieve certain information for you, if you need a robot to send emails for you, to send reminders for you. In fact, actually, there are some companies that have used robots to help them with payroll, or help them with employer benefits, or help them with
human resources,
401k match. Exactly. So RPA is used on a daily basis at a number of different companies, and it's really becoming popular because a lot of companies are trying to find as many places as they can to replace manual work with robots. So that way humans can focus on the more complex tasks that take a little bit longer and that take way more detail. And I'm glad, actually, Asar, that you mentioned the problem solving component, because what RPA is going to require is for someone who's able to go in and still be able to check the bot. It's still going to require that problem solving. It's still going to require some level of critical thinking to even create these solutions. So our RPA course, we have a partnership actually with UiPath, one of the leading resources for RPA. And we just teach students how to build their own solutions that can impact their economy. And something else that we wanted to promote in conjunction with that is for students to enter hackathons. I think that that's an interesting way for students.
Can you explain a hackathon?
Exactly. So a hackathon is essentially a competition where a number of competitors, students of any particular age, are able to sit in a room or sit online, and there's a common goal. There may be a theme to say to design a solution that can help people during COVID. And so a student could develop an automation, for example, that could allow a person to enter their grocery list, and a robot will go and find all the deals that exist in the local stores in their area and send them an email once they have a complete list of all those deals. So you could save money during this time. And so we really want to encourage students. That's the purpose of the RPA course, is to encourage students to build these automated tools on their own. And then we are also hoping in the future to have a cybersecurity component as well.
Yeah, and I think parents and even kids probably are not as aware about, data collection and how that impacts their lives, and how cybersecurity, even the slightest things that kids may do online, can, affect them one way or another. And knowing the rules of how to be a digital citizen, how to navigate online safely, how to make sure that you're securing your future by protecting your data. So the sooner kids learn that earlier, the better off as well. And we've been able to work with Ricky West here in Maryland too, who has I'll just say an extension. He deals with more of the adult part, but now a lot of places are trying to get kids introduced to cybersecurity. But again, like I said, I think for people of African descent, us and things that happen to us online, one way or another, do impact our lives, probably even more so. Whether it's, filling out a job application, you don't know that if that algorithm is going to kick out people in your zip code. So there's a lot of things, awareness that we need to have, that again, we may not even be conscious of right now or even thinking about. And because of those things that are happening, it may require us to form advocacy groups. These are things that maybe kids can explore in terms of looking at the ethics of coding. What is okay for you to code, what's not, because behind every program is somebody who wrote it. And sometimes those people may have certain biases. So kids can begin to look at those issues and things that have happened, and whether or not, if that's going to be an adverse effect on their community or something that, okay, well, we need to have something to address this. So I think, again, raising the awareness, giving the content, but also raising the awareness and problem solving, the critical thinking, and looking at your community and seeing what ways coding can help solve some of those problems as well.
Indeed. And you had mentioned robotics, earlier, and, to an extent, like the coding could just be a one of many skill sets that one would need even for that. So like you would have to, for full on robotics, you would have to know physics, and you would have to, to a degree, know electrical engineering, and so with the coding, I'm saying, piece, that just, lumps it all together. So you would have, a variety of skills that you can go into a number saying, of industries, so to speak. And so, think about, all the things that are going to be computerized in the near future, especially motor vehicles and or whatnot. Now, the downside, is you mentioned earlier, is this notion of automation and getting rid of, saying, the jobs. But is there, in your estimation, ways that they can utilize these skills outside? Because who's to say in the future that you don't create code that creates code? You don't create an automated system that creates its own, that does its own coding. So like, what else has to be stressed? So there's the aspect of the coding, just knowing what codes go together, but then there's also almost kind of like an artistic element to it that needs to be. So some people will say STEM, but others will say STEAM, that they'll add the A, saying, for art. So where else could this go? What else could they utilize besides just coding programs all day, if y'all have analyzed that?
Well, I would say this. Now, in terms of that, I would say I would go back to the community for problem solving. Whether it, and I think them identifying problems in the community and see if they can be addressed by projects. Whether it be, for example, there are some schools, there's some kids where maybe they design a water filter system for certain areas. There are different things that they can do to implement that STEAM method where you're actually designing things, you're designing products. And I would like to say also, I would like them to see that you don't have to wait to get to college to actually be able to create and design something. So I'll just look at this. Here's something that I said would just be really simple. They have their phones, their computers, right? They have lots of pictures, but how many of them actually use them maybe to create videos for family? So there's different ways that they can actually begin to implement some of the things outside of just coding. That's just one. But I would go back to community, building community. I'll just say projects, things that even on a larger scale than that, besides the community, you have things that need to be done in terms of globally. And I'll just say school. So there are ways that first they have to identify an issue. And I think that's part of computer science too. You identify whatever the issue is. So I think beyond just the coding, identifying and looking in your environment, because for many of us, our environments are, there are a lot of challenges that sometimes if we thought about how we could solve them, maybe we need to do this, or maybe we need to work together with this. And also I would say collaboration. So maybe a group of kids not only work with themselves, but maybe they collaborate with the organization to solve a problem. So that's one way that I could see coding expanded beyond just, typing in a thing. Because if you have that skill set and you combine it with an organization or let's say an advocacy project in some way, the potential is limitless as far as I can see. That's just one. You could always add in art and design and things like that as well into a project. So I would just say connecting to community and thinking beyond borders, thinking beyond just your school, home, and work, but thinking about how we can improve the society as a whole. And especially, I would say first, our communities. I'm really big in believing that our kids need to begin to look at their communities to solve some of the problems. So that's what I would say with that. Right. I would just say looking at STEM, whatever lens of STEM you're looking through, as a means of solving problems for your community first, and then beyond that.
Right. And I think the only thing that I have to add to that, I actually study art and computer science in college, and that creativity really does come into play. I've been seeing in the comments that someone has to build the robots, which is true. And although we are expecting that there are jobs that will be lost to automation and technology, there are a number of jobs that are created. And also, I think the sort of caveat to that is that, there's a level of lifelong learning now that really is being heavily, just constantly mentioned, lifelong learning. And it's going to be a skill that the future of change makers will need to have in order to be able to, whether it's shift skills or to take a different approach. Because if we're talking about robots, even if there is code to build the robot automations, there has to be someone who's going to check the code. There has to be someone who can take a look at those processes, sort of data mining, someone who can pay attention to that level of detail and be able to make sure that it's implemented correctly.
And I would just also add to that, all the estimates in terms of computing field as a whole show that there are more jobs than there are actually people who maybe have the skill set to fill them. So again, even if you want to go beyond a job, because again, you have other ways that people can earn money. You don't necessarily have to have a job. There are people who do remote, teaching, do remote projects and such. So I think there's a lot of different freedoms that come along with people who are trained and have the preparation for it. So, I mean, yeah, if you have a job that now is remote, wonderful, you could do it. But then again, if you don't have that skill set to know the programming or even have the fundamentals, like about the math, the science. And again, I think if kids are learning early, okay, we did this project, it incorporates the math, the science, the coding, so they can get used to, whether it be, because the same thing you're saying physics, they had that on the first grade level, on the kindergarten level. So it's a matter of entry point levels for kids. So you could teach those same things, like I say, discrete mathematics. But if you were to, like, I worked a lot with curriculum, if you were to backward design it, what were the first skills that they needed to become strong in that area? So I think that's another way and another strength that we have with the company in terms of looking at, okay, well, I noticed the kids did not do well in this particular thing. What are they missing? And you'll find out might be things like fractions, maybe it's things like in terms of, understanding a certain format or understanding multiplication. All those things come out and they can be corrected earlier. Not only that, through project-based. So it's not just like you're doing, memorization, which is important that they know it, but they're also seeing the application of the knowledge. And I think the application of the knowledge is what's most powerful.
Indeed, indeed. Hold on, not that comment. Where is it? This one. Brother Rashu's been saying, been building RC cars and racing them since 8 and 9 years old. And I was just thinking, like, for example, if you teach, kids, like, let's say build, saying cars and to program them to do certain things, like you can build your own league, in the neighborhood and, and have different leagues even around the cities where they are racing and people pay and they win money. Like you can create industries. It's like, we got to get a little bit creative instead of just waiting for, opportunities, to come our way to find a way to get people. So when, and they're young and they see it's competition and you building. And I think that's something that has to be emphasized, because while a lot of us, went to school in the college for certain things, a lot of us lost the ability to create with our hands. And, those are the jobs that are paying, just like there's a tech shortage for certain things, there's also that. So like, I would love to see, people at least combine the computer science with electrical engineering. I think even with electrical engineering, you kind of have to do computer science to a certain extent. And so, we mentioned, the robots and stuff like this, now, this is the conspiracy theorist in me. So we seen Terminator 2 back in the, in the early 90s, and it was a black man who created the chip that ultimately brought in the Terminators, which, started off a whole revolution. So, will that be the case? We're building robots that will, take over the world and then put us in the matrix. Is that a fear that, y'all have? Are those kinds of questions asked by the little kids? Are we going to build the robots that are ultimately going to take over, or what else, has to be involved? So this goes into the whole AI, situation. Like what is AI? What's the vision? What's the limitations of it today, and where do y'all see it going in the future, and why having knowledge of AI is even important in this day and age?
Sure. So I don't know if people in the chat too remember a few years ago, I think it was around 2000, maybe it was about 2016, 2017, where they said that Facebook chatbots had started talking to each other and they created their own language.
Yeah.
And similarly, I was actually just reading a report from Gartner the other day where they were talking about how now, even though people are designing the scripts behind robotic process automation, that soon the scripts will be generated automatically. I would say it is a concern, but then I think that there's also a concern over what type of regulation is going to be involved there. For example, with Alexa, Alexa was really big. Alexa is still pretty big, but there's some user error there. And there's also, I guess, I'm trying to think of, I don't think that people are 100% comfortable with it. And I think that there's still a lot of room for improvement in that space. For example, now people found out that Alexa was listening in on their conversations. So there's still so much, I feel like, gray area in that space that I think a lot of people are still trying to figure out, how can we sort of control this? How can we get a better handle on this? What can we allow? Will there be more restrictions? And I think at this point in time, it's too early to speak definitively on AI. I still think that there's a lot of regulating that has to go on there. I mean, I think even with Amazon, there was a device that was created so that if you slip this cover onto the Alexa, she won't hear anything you're saying. She won't even respond if you use her call name. But I think there's a lot of room for improvement there. That's all I can say.
Yeah, and I don't even know if for me, I don't know if I can even clearly imagine what the world will look like 5 years from now with these different changes. But I do think, speaking to your end, talking about having the leagues or having groups of people who are concerned or people who want to be a part of this shift and kind of be able to manage it a little bit better is going to be really important. And I think also to the end, you talked about, creators, entrepreneurs. And I don't know if I could see 20 years down the line for what the job, what taking care of yourself and having, whether it be money, however, digital, whatever, to take care of you, what it will look like. But I think we're starting to see some of those shifts already. And like I said, a year ago, when people said, oh, you're going to lose 10 million jobs or 20 million, I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. But we're here. So, but I think African Americans, especially being able to create employment for other African Americans, is going to be critical. And I think also connections with, I know there are a lot of groups that are connecting with different countries in Africa to see what kind of work, what kind of efforts can be done will be important too. So I think that I just think of it kind of like beyond borders, not just staying here and thinking of just United States, but who are other like-minded people that want to create this new space so that, you won't have to go to a 9-to-5 anymore, or that's not the only option for kids in the future. So they can also begin to think, because kids can think of stuff that sometimes I think we don't even consider as adults, but it's that exposure again. I don't know. They may think, well, hey, we can trade, people are trading Bitcoin right now, right? A lot of the world is trading that, but the US isn't trading it in the way that other places are doing it. But, so sometimes I think based on the information that, unless you do a whole lot of reading and stay on top of it, we kind of miss. But I think having, again, AI is going to, unless people make laws to stop it, I don't know what's going to stop.
So it's inevitable that Skynet is going to bring the Terminators, is what you're saying.
I don't know about Terminators. I don't know about Terminators. I ain't gonna say that, but you have enough people who who create it that know more than the people who regulate it.
Indeed.
And when you're at that disadvantage, and I don't know, some of these people who make these laws and regulations, they're, behind. You can't, how you going to regulate what you don't even know?
Mhm.
So, I mean, yeah, but AI is here, but hopefully no Terminators. We don't want that.
Now, Sister Rocky, she's also a developer in the security and things of that nature. She is in the Facebook chat, so I can't pull it up on here.
Mm-hmm.
But she says, I think also with considering interest. Oh, let me get my mouse out of the way. Come on. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
No, for some reason, you know how when you put your mouse over something and then like a pop-up, it just stayed there. It stuck. It wouldn't move. So here we go. I think also with considering interest in making it culturally relevant, even looking back to indigenous math, etc., the ability to make it their own and understand all places it came from. So making, in terms of the curriculum itself, getting people into the STEMs, making it culturally relevant. And I was just thinking along with her statement that, it doesn't always have to be that we're creating new technologies per se, but creating better ones. So for example, we're here on this streaming platform, StreamYard. Somebody had to code this, and of course we're utilizing this. They charge me a service fee per month to use it. Of course, the money helps them to make improvements and stuff like this. But who is to say that we can't have our own streaming platform,
Right,
our own servers, our own YouTubes, and especially in this day and age. So in the news right now is Brother Nick Cannon. Because of some comments that he made, someone removes him from the show, and whether it was right or wrong is not being debated at the current moment. But if he had his own team of coders and things, like, he can make his own platform and show, and his money wouldn't be affected in that same way. Like, the technology allows for us now to a certain degree to compete with our with the traditional mediums. So if you have I don't think too many people sit down and watch television the way that I did back in the 90s, waiting for Family Matters and the Cosby shows, or in the 80s or whatever, Living Single. Like you're stuck on that day to watch it, because everything is streaming and stuff now. So now that there's the streaming technologies, we should be able to create our own streams, even though there are other streams out there. Like, why are we waiting? And I think that's something that we need to get into the heads of youth as well.
I completely agree. And the thing is, to me, why don't we have our own, besides what you're doing, our own media platforms? Because again, like I said, I believe that people, can have their viewpoints, but once you establish your platform, then you get to be the decider. So again, I think hopefully this shift right now is getting people to want to collaborate, and share their expertise to do such endeavors. I think it has to happen. It's overdue, because whether it be that platform or another one, it's constantly, I see people getting kicked off for this reason or that reason. And we should have something that is unfiltered, that allows us to share information that can be applied. So again, I'm for it. I know we have certain talents, but do we have all of them? No. But again, that's what we're talking about, the collaboration with people who are like-minded, that want to see these kind of ventures done, and understand that you're not just talking about, our generation, but future generations. Because right now we've often been in a dependency, situation where we have to depend on this, that, the other. And we already know that the film that is coming out on Saturday, what is it, $1 trillion? How many $1 trillion do we have in our community? And You know, how are we organizing it though is the question. And what are our efforts that we're going into that we think is really important. So I think, again, kind of just shift. And I think it starts here. I think this conversation, hopefully those people that are listening that are interested, because we talked about that with someone the other day. I said, that needs to be done. I think people like yourself are needed. And hey, and I don't know if you haven't started your media platform, this is great. But hey, get the service. I don't know what we can do to help, but we certainly would like to be a part of something like that, because we know that it's overdue. Exactly. That's all I can say. It's overdue, because the kids today, just as much as we want them to get good information and the parents to get it, there's so much to filter through. But if they knew I could go to this platform and get this information, and it's going to be, something that I can use, and that's going to help, like I said, improve lives. I'm there. And I think that it should be as known as we say, I'm turning to a certain station. It should be that way for us.
Exactly. And I think that's, one of the main points that we're trying to drive, at least with Millennial Tech Academy, is we're trying to, inspire the next generation of change makers to believe that there are opportunities out there for them. And another, as my mom mentioned a little bit earlier, with the curriculum development, the custom tailor, we developed a curriculum for Hammond Parish in Louisiana. And it's that understanding of meeting the students where they are and allowing them to see themselves in the work that they're creating, in the solutions that they're creating, where they're able to, become a little bit more attached to that and have, that much more interest in these topics.
And, we do understand how to design curriculum around, whether it be international standards for education or even the, someone mentioned culturally relevant. Well, yes. I mean, I have taught history. My knowledge is not as extensive as Brother Asar's here, but I do have enough to kind of like get the ball rolling. So we do understand having kids knowing that, where they came from, and also seeing images of people that have been able to do it, and understand that this is not the first time, or this, at slavery wasn't the first time that you had people who were scientists or people who were able to see the stars, the Dogon people. So we understand that concept too. And it's just a matter of, we've been able to write curriculum, but again, it's a matter of how you want it framed. Culture relevant, we could do the past, present, and future. As I said, in my experience in working in, different campuses where African-American children, that's a part of what we have been able to embed. So again, and when kids can understand there's a continuum, that this is not, they're not doing something that's out of the norm, it's expected. Of course, I can do that. But again, I'm really leaning towards kids being taught not to have to depend on going to a traditional job. I really want, because, I have a 16-year-old son, but, I'm looking at ways to have him shape skill set that don't require him to go to that traditional job. The research already shows what happens sometimes when we show up for position. And I want them to have options.
Exactly.
And it seemed like COVID has, made the world realize that, not every job requires you to come into the office, every day. And so, even just doing remote work, is an option. And so, I'm thinking on the lines now of, cybersecurity. You mentioned this earlier, but I'm looking at this in a kind of a holistic context, in the way that governments and people wanting to spy on our activities and try to utilize that data to kind of interrupt any kind of social movements. And, I come from a military family, and, one of the things that they would always stress, of course, is that when you're going to war, one of the first things that they look to attack any army, regardless, is your communication, and to cut off supplies, whether this be ammo, whether it be food or whatnot. So if you don't have communications, you can't communicate with each other, and you can't supply re-up on food and weapons, then there's no way ultimately that you're going to be able to win the war, no matter how motivated and enthusiastic you are. And so I think about just even with the, as a matter of fact, tomorrow, we're on this platform and program, we're going to be talking about the Nick Cannon thing. But in those cases, like, we need to know how to, kind of safeguard our information and protect our rights and our freedom of speech and things of that nature. So you need to create these types of platforms and have them secure enough, and allow for these type of heavy dialogue, with people who are culturally astute and to know what is exactly hate speech and what is not. Because some of our stuff, they don't speak our language, so they don't know how we communicate when we're just using, creative words to say the same thing. So you accept black, but if we say melanated or chocolatey, or blackety black, it's an issue. It is just us being creative, using the same thing to reference the same spirit and energy of the culture. And so, if we had and supported our own platforms along those lines, that it would be less stress. But we also, besides the coding, like that's in the works for me, because actually creating a university is part of the plan. One of the reasons why I went back to school for computer science. And back in the day, I used to have my own online radio program. And so this is back in the day when what program did I have? I had Windows Server 2003. So that's how far back it was. And so what people really don't realize is that your computer is a server unto itself. Like, the operating system, it is its own server. Now, it only allows for a limited number of connections to the screen at the time. So that's why you would have to get software like, Windows Server, whatever it is, updated now, or if you have a Linux, distribution, and how to make these things. But you can make your own servers, you can host your own websites and host your own gaming stream. And so, like, getting into this technology opens up so much, more for us. The only thing that was holding me back then is that I lived in an apartment complex, and you need a certain amount of bandwidth that you can only get at a commercial, get in a commercial account, and they wouldn't do it for my apartment. So I had a radio station. I would do live streams, playing music, and this is back in the day. I used to DJ a lot, but I can only have up to like maybe 100 people, viewing my stream before it would start acting funny. But these are the kinds of things, like, get a building, get a whole bunch of server racks, and let's make some things happen. And so I really want those of you who have young children that's either about to be 7, or within that range between 7 and 13, to sign up for these courses. And I'm telling you, as a science advocate in general, and a coder by trade, that you really want to get children into this and into the mindset. Because even if they don't necessarily code for a career, the skills that they obtain in this will transfer into other areas. And it's amazing that when I was first learning like discrete math, the first thing that I thought about in terms of discrete math is like, I can use this in my linguistic analyses, because you're still dealing with sets and stuff, and we did this in linguistics. And so it even inspired me to, like, I need to create a program that kind of automatically compares, because I do a lot of historical comparative linguistics, to compare languages, and to see if it generates cognates, and there's people trying to work on that. But the hard part about that is the human aspect of it, that we can make one word mean a whole bunch of other things. So how do you code for those extra meanings that so that's kind of the challenge, saying unto itself. But nonetheless, the skill sets that I learned in this one area, I can apply it. And, not only in terms of the way that I approach my linguistic analyses unto itself, but being able to create a technology that allows for me, because for linguists, it takes years to go through books of data and compare words and grammar. And like, that is a process. You may spend 10 years, comparing a few languages. So if you had a computer program that can speed that process up, just all you're doing is putting the data entries in, that would help. And so it's, you can imagine, like, I'm also into, I'm looking into building a tiny home, in the future. And so I'm also into kind of like sustainable development and all of this other kind of stuff, and trying to figure out ways, even though we're dealing with, trying to build, homes and communities that are sustainable and stuff. How can the technologies fit in there? How can we code that so, when we're building these, little Africa towns, as we call them, that are sustainable, how can we utilize the technologies to communicate and or make us safer? It's so many possibilities. But of course, we're going to need a lot of us with those skill sets. And it's not that many. When I remember in college, when I would go to my upper level courses in computer information systems, it was nothing but Asians and Europeans in the courses. I was like one of 2 or 3, Black people, if that,
Right.
And so I know that that's probably representative, I'm saying, across the board.
You just feel like your people are missing out.
Yes.
You do.
And part of that too is the skill set we talked about. A lot of times when they get there, a lot of them are intimidated. There are gaps, for whatever reasons that maybe didn't get addressed early on, that kind of put them at a disadvantage in some of the upper level, higher level mathematics courses, which you would need for computer science. So but I think also them feeling that they're not intimidated. And then again, when they're younger, the same skill set, you use it over the same language. An algorithm is an algorithm. You learn it at 7, when you hear it at 21, okay, well, you can build on what you already knew.
Right.
And
there's not that level of intimidation.
And I think ultimately, like you said, I say that the media ecosystem, entrepreneurship ecosystem, where, those who have similar thought pattern, have some of the know-how, can collaborate to create some of these platforms that will be self-sustaining. I'll just say that, because I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen with the job market, but we do know that there are skills that you can acquire that can transfer those specific concepts to other areas of your lives to get you to improve things, to think about how to solve some things that are happening around you. And to me, this was just one of the inroads that I've seen that is going to be here for a long time. I don't see it going anywhere.
I know math. I want to ask you this question. I know math and seems to be intimidating to a lot of youngsters coming up, and they believe that they are not wired to do math. And so, like, what are some strategies or techniques that y'all have learned and incorporated in your curriculum, or just outside of even the millennial school, to help young people get over that hump and not be so scared of it, thinking that they can't do it, even with the coding, saying logic and things of that nature?
Well, I'll see. One of the things I say with going back to something like a project, you can include fractions in there. Maybe they have to measure something. Maybe they have to do some multiplication. So they're doing it, but it's based in maybe something that they're interested in doing. So it's a project that they get to choose, where you can embed those skill sets. That's one way, because it's the application of knowledge. Other things could be for them to collaborate and work in groups. So when they're working in groups, they say that kids actually can learn material sometimes better when it's taught through a peer, someone who, their same age group, to show them, oh, this is how you do this. So sometimes that could be another way to reinforce the skills that they're not as strong in. And then again, practice, there's nothing that beats that. You could do the projects and all that stuff, but also starting out early. I would say if they're able to, kindergarten, age, making sure that the kids don't expect the schools to do everything. I would say parents, you the first teacher, make sure that you get the workbooks, work with them, find little things that they can do that would allow them to do even recipes, measuring stuff. They like to cook, have them learn how to measure. So those are just some of the ways. But again, I would just say parents, the biggest deficits probably show up not only for reading, but also for math in those elementary years. So, you want to make sure that they have a firm foundation going into school and monitor it. Don't expect, because you got an A or B on a report card that's exactly what does that mean? You ought to have a way to qualify it, and work with them, find different activities, hobbies. For Nia, it was like, she liked the, what was it, little bulbs and things that you had to, I can't remember.
The wire kits.
Yeah, the wire kits. I got a wire kits and things like that, just to talk to them about negative and positive charges, things like that. So find out what they're interested in, and then try to find a way that it can incorporate math. That's a way to get more hands-on. So those are some things you can do. But again, I would just say the elementary years are extremely, extremely critical, because that's going to lay the foundation for middle school, high school, or even if you're homeschooling. I think if you're homeschooling, you may have even a better handle sometimes because you know what you're giving your kids. But I would just say monitor and make sure you have things that they enjoy doing too. If there's something that they enjoy doing, well, you want to play the video game, build one. There's enough things, we have Scratch, there's different things that you can learn how to build a game, your own game, not just being a consumer. So getting them also at being the consumer-based mentality, but thinking about, okay, well, I can do this myself, or this has math in it too. So I think the experience with math, I think it's success and experience. Nia had some really great teachers along the way too. Some people are, blessed enough to be able to homeschool their kids, and those people have to send them off to the, schools every day. Then you just want to, make sure that you're monitoring, making sure that the kids, what they know. It's not an accident. You know what they know. And then another thing too is with curriculum, you could actually, like I said, design it from whatever, if it's discrete math you want to go to, well, what are those prerequisite skills that they need in order to be sufficient and proficient in that area of discrete mathematics. There are ways to do that. So these are things that we look at in a curriculum. Okay, well, we want them to be here and be able to go into a college or a training program and being able to pass these entry-level tests. Then these are the skills that they need. They have to have fractions, multiplication, and knowing where the breakdown comes and knowing how to fix it. So based on how kids respond with the problems that we may give them, or how they responded, looking at that, well, they're missing this, or they don't understand this concept. So I think a really good program should be able to tell you that. So you're not all over the place, because if you could see, okay, well, they didn't understand how to multiply the fractions here. They didn't understand reciprocal properties. So there may be things like that, but that'll come out in the work.
Exactly. And I would say another, just to add on to that, in addition to the curriculum, is introducing some level of differentiation, because, I think in the traditional learning model, students may be taught one way, but there are a number of different ways to, whether it's play to students' strengths. Some students are visual learners. Some students prefer to hear things. Some students prefer to actually get their hands on and try different things out. And so playing to your student's strength, I think, is a crucial part of it. And also something that young learners really seem to like is teaching, their fellow students or anyone else who's in the classroom with them. They really take pride in being able to share their knowledge, and it's something that's inspiring also to their classmates, and just having that level of relatability. For example, in summer camp I used to teach at, this was students maybe between the age of 7 and 13 who maybe had, seen friends with skateboards. If you're explaining or trying to show them radius or trying to get them to understand degrees, then I explain it in terms of, okay, well, you do a 360 on a skateboard, then it's, a full circle. And just, trying to find different avenues for them to, exactly, relatable avenues for them to really understand and connect with what it is you're teaching them.
And I think you brought up something, being able to explain it. So if you understand the concept, you can explain it. Not just putting some stuff down, but okay, well, so how did you do it? What was your process?
Writing it out and
what was your process? If they can explain the process, and I think with math, you're talking about more, step by step. How do you get to your answer? There might be some things you can change in there, but they still should be able to explain the process.
Exactly, and that's one piece that in the coding class we do emphasize. Pseudocode is not something that I really. I think that, a lot of people kind of bypass it, depending on what level they're at when they learn it. But, sometimes coding isn't just about the syntax, but understanding what it means and understanding if you have a solution, how can you break it down into manageable problems that you'll be able to use to, just solve it. And how can you explain it to someone else? And then it's about the implementation.
Yeah, I think that's a big key there. And to me, it's relatable to language. And I think what stumps a lot of us is that we grow up in the United States only speaking one language. And because we only speak one language, we don't know how to view the world from a different lens and try to communicate in another language. And because, we're only used to one language, people aren't understanding that mathematics is a language and that these are different type of symbols. So like if you was to learn the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, you got to think differently. And it forces you to abandon, how you would do it in English and the letters that you would use and to be able to reference those symbols and, and understand that this means something else. In this language, is to think differently and to think in that language. And so if we introduce them to a second language, early, that I think that would ease in the process. But even understanding and math or whatnot, it's the language piece. And even like I'm working on a way to, kind of teach linguistics and mathematics at the same time and to show and in what ways they're similar. But that's another discussion for another time. I want to ask, are y'all familiar with the Raspberry Pis? And have y'all worked with that? Is that's something that y'all would encourage the kids to work with?
Well, we have worked with Raspberry Pis in the past. In my opinion, it's a little bit high level. At least as far as trying to understand some of the fundamentals. But I think Arduino is very similar to Raspberry Pi. I think that kids definitely have taken to that and they seem to enjoy it. I think maybe it's the physical aspect of it, but it seems that from my experience visually, when kids have been able to see their code reflected, whether it's on a screen, they seem to take a little bit more to it. But I think I've noticed with the older kids that they definitely do like the Arduinos, the Raspberry Pis, because then there are a number of projects you could do, whether it's sensor movement. I mean, even creating your own blink camera, with the Raspberry Pi or Arduino. So, I mean, tons of opportunities. I think that's, it's a little, I'd say it's in the future, but I mean, definitely so many projects you could do with that.
Indeed. Well, you've been rocking with us for about an hour and 20 minutes. And, we could talk all day in terms of tech, but I just wanted to say thank you, for coming on the program and giving us your story and letting us know about this resource that is out there for young people. And I know many of you all have young people, and I would encourage you all to take advantage of this resource here, the Millennial Tech Academy.com. So we're sitting here with the founders and teachers, and we want to help them expand and, get the whole Raspberry Pi course in there, and the gaming course, in the future. But if you want to learn about AI and robotics and coding, this is where you want your children to be. So with that said, again, thank you very much for coming on. It was a pleasure to have you. For those of you who have not already, please like and share the video.
Thank you.
Keep circulating the video. But thank
you so much. We appreciate it.
And thank you to everyone who showed up.
Yes, thank you. We appreciate you.
No doubt. So I'm have you all hang on in the green room, as we say. But just to remind the public that tomorrow on the 17th, we will have a conversation on the Nick Cannon situation. And so, I'll be talking about basically, why pseudo information is dangerous, but how he could have worded some of the things that he was talking about and be historically accurate, and why it's important to have sound research methodologies, when making these types of claims and things publicly, and how he could have avoided, everything that has happened as a result of his commentary. So you don't want to miss that. And I probably have a panel discussion. So my commentary is going to actually be very brief. And I know that seems impossible for a lot of y'all that know me, but I promise it won't be that long. So I'll invite some friends over, and we'll continue the dialogue. So y'all check me out on tomorrow. It's going to be a little later at 9 p.m. Eastern, since it's Friday, and we will get it in. So with that said, this is my contact information, and y'all be blessed and have a great evening and a blessed weekend. And don't forget to go to hoppyfilm.com and purchase your ticket for the documentary. And y'all check out millennialtech.com. Y'all have another website too, do you not?
Yes, we do.
I remember too. So I'm sorry, we didn't even get to that, because I know y'all was talking about, I don't know if that was on the Bitcoin and whatnot, but tell us about the second site before we go.
Sure, that's fine. So our second site is our nonprofit, Millennial Tech, where we just focus on programming more so in smaller communities. And we initially started out to have in-person programming, but recently been transitioning some of that curriculum and programs to online.
Yeah, and that's the one we're talking about, maybe looking at Bitcoin for that particular organization, the nonprofit side. So that's still in the works though. So
no problem. Well, y'all hop over to millennialtech.com and check it out and register your kids. And I will see y'all on tomorrow. Y'all just hang out with us, and I'll be back. I'll see y'all later. Peace and love, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you for watching, everybody.